Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started as people are signing in, and welcome all to New Perspectives and this new four-part series on nation souls, which we're very excited to introduce. I'm Rade, and I'm joined by Vladimir, and we are both here at the La Grace Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. We also have HP Rama joining us today. HP is the founder and president of our university and benefactor of the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Centers. And of course, today we also have our esteemed speaker, Dr. Basu, whom we are always extremely honored to host. We lastly have joining us at this time, Dr. Martha Orton, who will be speaking on a panel with Vladimir in about 2 weeks on nation souls. So most of you know Dr. Basu and are familiar with his work as a psychiatrist engaged in consciousness paradigms. Dr. Basu is deeply interested in the interplay of Aurobindonian metaphysics and mental health, and has developed a module of consciousness-based psychology, and along with Dr. Michael Miovich, authored a book on this topic, which looks at the psychopathology and counseling from an entirely new perspective that arises from the experiential teachings of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. So today, Dr. Basu introduces New Perspectives four-part series on nation souls with a discussion on the formation of the nation soul. He will address how the nations in making were initiated in a loose scaffolding where a basic stratification attempted to maintain social stability and cultural integrity. But as he says, this was not enough, and a second stage emerged to maintain a facade of uniformity and centralization of power. Still, the nation souls needed something more to be consolidated, a free internal development where social uniformity had to be replaced by a unity in consciousness. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Basu, but also remind everyone that as the talk goes on, if you have any questions whatsoever for Dr. Basu, just put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to them by the end of the session. And Vladimir will be facilitating the balance of this webinar. Dr. Basu, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you especially your Lagras Center and our university for giving me this opportunity to speak on a topic which is very close to Sri Aurobindo's heart. We see that Sri Aurobindo started with nationalism. As you know, that there are just now, because it is the 75th year of Indian independence, a lot of programs on Indian nationalism are being held where Sri Aurobindo's role is being emphasized. But on the other hand, you see, when Sri Aurobindo was confirmed that India would be free, it happened much early in his life, that when he was very confirmed that this freedom was going to come, and it was as true as the rising of the sun the next day. So then he turned his attention to world unity, to internationalism. And this is something which he has expounded in great details, but which unfortunately the intellectuals of the world who deal with social and political things, they have not given much attention, because they think that it was written during the World War I and it was relevant at that time. But actually, he was using the World War I background as a template for his future projection of his political vision. So that is very important, and you see that everything that he said today can be made relevant in today's times, because he was using it for his, what I say, that is future projection. And one of the first concern was that humanity is moving towards a world unity. That is something that is acting, and we cannot deny it. That is a unity which is already there, but which we are not conscious of, and humanity is wanting to move towards the global unification. And history will find out its ways how to achieve that, even if you don't want to deny it. And the second thing is, for him was most important was the synthesis or the harmony between individualism and collectivism, which actually has never happened up to now. You see, the individualism and collectivism, they have not been reconciled properly. So his whole treatise of ideal of human unity was to search that how these two could be reconciled. Even at hindsight, if we say that what were the of the many reasons for which the USSR collapsed, of course, there are many reasons, but there is one psychological reason, of course, which you cannot ignore, that the conflict between the classes, the brilliant conflict between the classes, which Marxism did, was not accompanied by an equally brilliant analysis of the conflict between the class and the individual, between the collectivity and the individual. So this is a great, what you call, dichotomy that is still going on. And Shobindu was finding out ways and means how to bridge that gap. And it is in this context, he gave his political vision, his thoughts on the social perspective of the world, and which is very difficult, as Vladimir was saying a few minutes back, that it is something which human beings understand very little, which is actually true. Human beings understand very little. So I will be presenting you, Shobindu's the concept of how nations are formed. So there's a very, he has outlined all these things very methodically, and in a way, he has done it in a way so that we can use it to think about how we progress about the nation idea in the future. So he's not talking about he's not concerned about only the past. He's not talking about what happened in the past and he lives it there. No, not at all. His concern of studying the nation idea was to see that how it progresses, and ultimately when an internationalism will come, what will be the fate of the nation? How is the nation going to join the orchestra of internationalism? Will it join like that with its uniqueness, or is it going to dissolve? So all these questions he pondered over it, and that's how he has presented his ideas, seminal ideas. And we want to go to his ideas straight away. So we do a sharing of the screen. So this is the Shobindu's perspective on the formation of the nation soul. So nationhood, as Shobindu outlined, there are 3 stages in the formation of a nation. And the first stage, of course, is something loose. No? There is a loose scaffolding. At first, there is a very loose scaffolding. You see, there is not something very consistent, something very coherent. You don't expect it at the beginning. So something that is a loose scaffolding, which is resistant to progress. But you need to consolidate that scaffolding for social stability and cultural integrity. You need to consolidate that scaffolding. So this consolidation, how is this going to happen? As Shobindu describes that this consolidation required a social hierarchy. You see, it is needed. A social stratification is needed. A social hierarchy is needed. Otherwise, from that chaos, something solid will not come out. So that's something that chaotic, what you call, beginning that is happening when the nation idea has not been consolidated. And that time, the first thing that is happening is a social hierarchy. And with 4 social activities, which are very important, and both in the East and in the West, as Shobindu explains, both in the East and in the West, they were important. One was the spiritual function. Questions will give after we finish. We'll raise questions. Sonalidhi will take the questions afterwards. You just keep in mind. I will just in flow tell about Shobindu's vision. So these 4 social activities: the spiritual function, political domination, the double economic function of mercantile production and interchange, and dependent labor. So you see that these 4 functions were there, and feudal Europe, as Shobindu explains, with this clergy, nobility, this bourgeois and proletariat, they had a very close resemblance to the 4-fold Indian order, the caste system. So you see, there's a remarkable correspondence with the social hierarchies, both in the East and in the West, because you need these 4 different activities. You need a spiritual function, you need political domination, you need economic functions, and you need service, you need labor. You need all these 4 things. Now, but in the West and the East, these social hierarchies arose from very different perspectives. But that is again a different story. You see, social hierarchy had very different origins in Europe and India. And Shravandu explains that in Europe, it came out from the social perspective. The social hierarchy came from the social perspective. In India, it was different. Actually, it was a spiritual seed idea, an intuitive idea that was expanded into a social idea. That the four orders arose from the body of the Brahma. This arose, and then this was used to organize the social hierarchy. But in today's world, the same seed idea, which was an intuitive idea, can be used to construct a psychological stratification, no? The fourfold what you call development of functions in one personality. The same idea, seed idea, there was a seed idea, and that seed idea was a spiritual idea, and that seed idea was used in sociology, in the social circles, to build up the social hierarchy. It can also be used to construct a different hierarchy, different, not called hierarchy, a different functioning. I will say that in today's world, when the caste system has become redundant, then that fourfold idea can be used to develop the personality, wisdom, harmony, perfection, strength. They can be brought together to form a new harmony. So there's a different story. I think one day, if Vladimir agrees, we should have a thorough exposition on the Indian caste system, how it came, very interesting from a spiritual origin. And now it served a social purpose, but that purpose it is not valid now, and then it can be used to serve some other purpose now. So that is a different story. But you see, the social hierarchy, what we are concerned here about the social perspective, in the social perspective, and when was the social hierarchy stabilized? When Shravandu explains that one or other social groups would dominate, and that domination would lead to the type of the nation idea that will evolve, that will develop. So that if the religious group predominated, so you could expect a theocratic state to develop, you see. But in India, the spirituality was so important, that the Brahmins was so important, and the sannyasis were also given more, of course, more value than the Brahmins. But a theocracy didn't evolve in India, so that shows the experience elsewhere. Why? Then if a warrior group comes out, then there is a nation of military might, a nation of military power can come. If there is an intellectual group which is predominating, as we find in certain parts of Europe in the olden days, when the aesthetic culture developed, and then there can be periodic upsurges by the proletariat. You see, they will not come like that, like a religious group. There is a trajectory that develops into a theocratic state. The trajectory of the warrior group evolves into military state. The trajectory of the intellectuality develops into an aesthetic culture. But the proletariat doesn't develop into a trajectory like that, because it is more what we call spread out. It is more what you call diversified. And what can happen is there can be a periodic upsurge by the proletariat to change the power equations, and the nation's identity can be redefined. So the proletariat has that power. The proletariat has that power. You see, Shravandu is the first person in India to use the word proletariat. Before him, in India, nobody used the word proletariat, and that has been now recognized. The Communist Party of India, in the history of the communist movement, they have acknowledged that Shravandu is the first person to use this word proletariat. Of course, his meaning of the word proletariat and afterwards what was used, that was a bit of difference, of course, was there. Now, the nationhood, the first stage, despite limitations, this social stratification actually helped to grow nascent nationhood in Europe and India. So at the beginning, this social stratification, it served a purpose. It served a purpose. You cannot say that it was without a purpose. It was all bunk. It is not like that. It actually helped to standardize the societal functions and to standardize social activities. So in a way, the nascent nationhood that was developing, so that was being helped. And in the absence of social scaffolding, the push to nationhood was absent. This Shravandu emphasizes Shravandu emphasizes very beautifully, giving the example of Islamic civilization. Now, he exclaims, these are his words, that the Islamic civilization with dominant principle of equality and brotherhood. You see, Islam had brought that principle of equality and brotherhood as a dominant principle. And they had a peculiar system of slavery, which Shravandu remarked, it was remarkable, because that system of slavery was such that even the slave could rise to be to the throne, to be the king. You know that in India we had the slave dynasty also when the Islamic invasion was there. So even with this system of slavery which was so peculiar and which could allow the slave to rise to the top, and with all that notion of equality and brotherhood, still that push to a conscious nation state in Islamic countries was not there. It started doing it only after the pressure of modern ideas. Of course, Shivam writes this in 1917, 100 years back. So more than 100 years back, he writes this. So modern, you have to take in that sense. Modern means at the time when Shivam was writing it, 1916, 1916, 17, when Shivam was writing this. So in the pressure of modernity, the pressure of modern circumstances, they started becoming conscious nation states. But the conscious nation states that we find, which you find in Europe, which you find in Italy, in France, that the conscious nation state, that idea was there, so dominant, so proud, so prominent. So that was not there. And then Shavindra ascribes it that because the social hierarchy was absent. So you see the importance he gives it to the social hierarchy. You see, in today's world, we try to judge things according to what they have come to, what they have been presenting, what they have been presenting today. But today they have been presenting, the social hierarchy has been presenting in a way which is not in a way that was presented before. Today we have a decadent form of it. We have a perverted form of it that does not represent the original form in which it was presented, in which it developed. And Sri Aurobindo acknowledges that form. So it is a very important idea. And the social hierarchy had to become counterproductive at one point. You see, for many reasons, it became counterproductive. In India, one very important reason why which it became counterproductive, because it was not the function, the capacity of the person, but the birth or the what you call the heredity that became important. So if I am a knowledgeable person, that doesn't mean that another knowledgeable person will succeed me as a Brahmin. My son, who might not be knowledgeable, will become a Brahmin. So you see that was one of the many reasons of downfall. In history, we have the ups and downs. Sri Aurobindo studied that in great extent, that how the social hierarchy became counterproductive, how the caste system became redundant. That's a different story, and we will not go into it. But also Sri Aurobindo studied that and explained it in great details. Now, the consolidation of nationhood now needed two principles. When the social hierarchy was no longer relevant, the two principles, or they had to go back because two other principles had to come in front. One is the centralization of common life. Common life means what? It is breaking the social hierarchy. In common life, when you use the word common life, when Sri Aurobindo uses the word common life, he is meaning to say that here it is irrespective of your position in the social hierarchy. The common life is a commonality of life, the commonality of communal life. And that commonality of communal life has to come under a secular head. Of course, you see, Sri Aurobindo has used the word secular many times, and it's not the way in which today we use the word secular. We use the word nowadays, secular word is used in political circles in a very different way. But Sri Aurobindo was not using it in 1916 in that sense. He was using it in a more of, you say, in a sense of neutrality. Somebody who is not biased towards this system or that system, somebody who is concerned only with the society. So when he talks about secularity, vis-a-vis about the society and nation, he is not talking in a way in which today we try to understand secularism as something that is opposite to religion or spirituality. It's not like that. Sri Aurobindo is not talking about that. The sense is different. And the sense is one of you can say that is somebody ahead who is neutral, whose judgment is stable. I will not say non-judgmental, there's a very strong word, non-judgmental, but who is judgmental in a what you call respectable way. And second, which is more important, that the creation of a political self-consciousness. So these two things became now important. So this is the second stage of nationhood. The first stage of nationhood was something where from an amorphous matrix, something was evolving, and that social stratification helped to what you call structure that system. And when that structure was ready, then we had to go to the second stage, when you have to centralize the common life under a secular head, and you have to create a political self-consciousness. And you see, it was necessary because Sri Aurobindo said that if the social hierarchy continued to remain, what would happen? At one time, they had to go. If they continue to remain, then a warrior class or a theocracy could actually emerge to dominate, and the rest of the people could suffer like anything. If this second stage didn't come, if this centralization of common life, this impulse didn't come, then the social hierarchy would remain and would give rise to a warrior class or a theocracy that could actually dominate and exploit all other classes. So you see, it was a necessity, it was a historical necessity, a necessity of the collective consciousness that is growing, that this should happen. So they show in those words that the direction needed was a change from spiritual or political authority, to centralization of common life under a secular head. So in some places it was this religious authority which was dominating, in some places it was the political authority which was dominating. And then regardless of the spiritual or political background, the common life was to be centralized under a secular head. Of course, if religious tendency was strong, then one could conceive of a national head who would be fountain of authority in both the departments, both in politics and in religious matters. One could be the fountain of authority in both the domains. So that was something. It was not for everybody, for in some countries. So that could be necessary. And the creation of a political self-consciousness was needed, without which a separate nation unit cannot be successfully formed. You see, without a political self-consciousness, you cannot form the idea of a nation. You cannot form the idea of a nation. You need to have a political self-consciousness. Very important. You need to have a political self-consciousness. You cannot say that I want to be part of the world, part of the nation, and I want to be above and without politics. It's not like that. You need to have a political self-consciousness, which is very important. And a church or sacerdotal class cannot form the organized political unity of a nation, because Shivji said that their motivation is different. The motivation of the church is different. The motivation of the sacerdotal class, like the Brahmins, they were different. So they cannot form the organized political unity of a nation. The organized political unity of a nation needs a different motivation. You cannot have the old type of motivation active. Of course, Shivji gives that the exception was only in Tibet, where the sacerdotal class became the ruling political class. So in Tibet, it was a very different experiment. When Tibet, it was a very different experiment, that the sacerdotal class became the ruling political class, but that only happened there because of a very strong mystical and occult tradition was, of course, behind this thing, so that this could actually function well. So it needed a mystical and occult support so that this could be sustained. Without that, you see, it is difficult to sustain sustain this, that the sacerdotal class will become also the political class. People would be killed. You see, so there must have been a very strong occult and mystical tradition behind in working in Tibet, so that this could actually exist. Now, in nation of the second stage, what was the Indian scenario? India did not have a all-pervading national self-consciousness, which was distinctly separate from spiritual and cultural oneness. So we had a spiritual oneness in India, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. We had cultural commonness. We had our epics, we had our temples, we had our fairs, we had all our common things which bound everybody in India. Though the states were different, the kingdoms were different, the kings were different, but still there was a common thread running through the spiritual and the cultural forums they were running. But there was no all-pervading national political self-consciousness. Mind you, this is shown in these words: all-pervading national political self-consciousnness. And Shiobindo says, he explains why this happened. Why did this happen? Because he squarely lays the blame. The dominant, these are what Shiobindo's words, the dominant sacerdotal Brahmin class dominated society and determined principles of national life. They stood in the way of development, followed by more secular-minded European and Mongolian peoples. So you see, there is a dominant Brahmin class who determined the principles of national life, and they stood in the way of development of a political consciousness, self-consciousness, which was not there in Europe and in China. It was not there. So, and the political and social factors came in front only when the Brahmin caste began to change. And when did the Brahmin caste begin to change? With the European influence, the Brahmins lost their exclusive hold on national life. So European influence also had some positive areas. One of these was that the Brahmins lost their exclusive hold on national life. And the impact of modernity led to massive secularization of the Brahmin caste. So the Brahmin caste itself became secularized. You see, people, there are many people in India who are coming from the Brahmin backgrounds who became the great torchbearers of modern India, irrespective of caste, class, color, religion, and everything. So it was there, you see, because you see in India, the upper caste was also the upper class. The upper caste was also the upper class. So that is why when they secularized or when they became modern, they could also provide leading roles. So when you see that the freedom movement happened, that many Brahmins coming up and actually playing leading roles. Very interesting, very complex situation. India is very complex and is a very different case study than other nations in the world. So nature had to utilize the instrument of foreign domination. You see, this Sri Aurobindo has referred this a number of times, that the Indian political self-consciousness had to develop. And when all other factors were not helping, then nature had to utilize the instrument of foreign domination to consolidate the concept of nationhood. If the foreign domination didn't come, then the motivation to be a nation would have been missing. So the foreign domination came, the European domination, of course. He's talking not about the foreign domination which came before the Europeans. He's not talking about the invasion by the Mughals and the others. He's talking about the European invasion of India. And Sri Aurobindo knows that despite Brahmin resistance, it is not that there was national self-consciousness did not arise in India. It arose in certain pockets. It arose. It was there. It was there. It was there underlying the what you call the surface. It was always. It was there lurking. In some places, they actually evolved. They came out. And he gives three examples. He gives three great examples in India where even before the concept of Indian nationhood developed, the political self-consciousness of India started developing. And one is the Rajputs of Maywa, because they accepted the Raja in the double role, the head of the society and of the nation. So in Maywa, they accepted the Raja in a double role, because previously the head of the society was the Brahmin and the head of the nation was the Raja, the king. But in the Rajputs of Maywa, they made a shift. So it is not that they would need a Brahmin to be the head of the society. The king could also be the head of the society. And Guru Gobind Singh's Khalsa, you see, it became a common secular and spiritual center. There's again a very interesting story, a very great story that is followed from Guru Nanak's tradition. You know, Guru Nanak had his first spiritual realization was a voice came to him that there is no Hindu and there is no Muslim. And he tried to make Sikhism what we call a synthesis between deeper ideas of Islam and Vedanta. And Sri Aurobindo said that he did it much ahead of his times. What he did, ordinary people couldn't understand. They made of it a dogma, but actually he did something great and he did it ahead of his times. So, and following him, Guru Gobind Singh's Khalsa became a common secular and spiritual center. And then Marathas, you see that Marathas, when you talk of the Marathas, when you talk of Shivaji, you still get so much spirited, we get stimulated, because they not only had a secular head, but they secularized themselves in such a way. They secularized the Marathas, they secularized all of themselves in such a way that the whole people, Brahmin, Shudra, became for a time a nation of soldiers, politicians, and administrators. Mind you, then you can understand when Sri Aurobindo is using this term, because I'm using Sri Aurobindo's own phrase, I'm using it here. Then you see that Sri Aurobindo is using the word secular in a completely different way. The secular means that one has become neutral, one has become all-embracing, one is not biased towards one caste or the other caste. One is acting in a very Catholic manner. So his term secular has to be seen in a different light than way today in politics what is being used in India. It's not like that. It's a different connotation altogether. So when he says that they have secularized themselves, that they have made themselves but they were universalized in the common ideal, so that the whole people became a nation of soldiers, politicians, and administrators. A very remarkable development. You see, it actually did the push when the actual time came, so that the Indian nation would have to emerge. The Marathas were there as a motivating factor, of course. And then in the second stage of the nationhood also we have the consolidation of the monarchy. We have a consolidation of the monarchy. Now modification of social hierarchy led to concentration of power in their hands of a power dominant monarchical government. And powerful monarchies shape destinies of medieval nations. Mind you, Sri cites examples of how powerful monarchies shaped nations to be great. The Tudors in England, the Capests in France, the Romanovs in Russia, and very recent example, Hohenzollern in Germany was not very old. Very recent, Sri said that people were watching with awe. That how can this happen in modern times, in recent times, that they were what they did in Germany, but they did, or the Mikado in Japan. And this monarchy represented a subconscious need in the psyche of the people for a figure to consolidate aspirations. So it represented a subconscious need. So in the subconscious, that is in our psyche, there is a need to consolidate our aspirations. And then Shiovindu explains that this psychological trend in the subconscious explains the passion with which, the loyalty with which the great dynasties were served, even when they were in the downfall, even when they were falling down, even when they were the time had come for them to go. But still, there was a lot of loyalty among the masses, a lot of passion among the masses, because in our subconscious, in our psyche, there is a need for something like that. No? Because our psyche is something loose, amorphous, fragmented, and we need some scaffolding to hold. And at one time, history provided monarchy that scaffolding at the level of the nation. However, due to inbuilt limitations, which I will not go, which is a different subject altogether, monarchies had to be surpassed. So the third stage of nationhood came. When monarchies surpassed, when the age of the monarchies went away, then we entered the third stage of nationhood. And in the third stage of nationhood, monarchy consolidated, because monarchy consolidates political power and administration. But social consciousness, you cannot bound them there. You cannot fix them there. Only with your fixing of political power and administrative unity, you can't have a mastery of the social consciousness. So when the aggregate is stabilized, now when the aggregate is stabilized, the psyche of the aggregate, they need an expansion. There is a need for an expansion. They need to expand. And how are they going to expand? Expansion expresses as a quest for liberty. This need for expanding, even in the social aggregate, it comes, you see, as a quest for liberty, freedom. And the Shiovindu explains, you see, that freedom, when you talk about the individual, there is one thing. But when you talk about the society, when you talk about the nation in making, then liberty has to be understood in different domains. So Shiovindu explains there are three domains in which liberty had to be activated, or liberty had to be voiced, or liberty was coming up, bubbling up. One was the social religious sphere, because this ecclesiastical orders despotism, the religious despotism had to be given away, so that man is mentally and spiritually free. Man cannot remain mentally and spiritually bound to religious dogmas, dictates. Something will be given from the pulpit, and you have to follow that. The human nature cannot remain bound for a long time to that. And then the socio-political sphere, because the monopolies of the rulers have to be rid of, so that everybody can take share in national power, prosperity, activity. This reminds me, you see, because I'm a psychiatrist, and one day a schizophrenic patient, he was well, at that time he was well, he had lost both of his legs in an accident. So he was actually carried and brought in front of me. He couldn't be placed on a chair, so he was made to sit on the floor. And I was sitting in my chair in my clinic, and he was there on the floor because the two people had brought him, and they had just dumped him in front of me. And he looked at me and said, that I don't have two legs, and you are sitting there on the chair with your tie and suit, very well groomed. Do you think that you are better off than me? Of course not. You have only one vote. During elections, you can give only one vote. I also have one vote. You don't have two votes. You don't have a vote more than me. You see, when the elections are there, we go to vote. The government in power, I have an equal right as yours. We are equal. I might be sitting on the floor. I might not have legs, and you might be sitting on the chair with the AC on and all that. Baba. but that doesn't matter. You see, that's the power. That's the power. It's very interesting because we see in India, when elections happen, people from the villages, they deck up in their good clothes as if they're going for a festival. Because you see, even the proletariat, they have that notion that at last we have got a share in selecting who will be the government, and we are going to do it in a very beautiful way. We are going to do it with duties, and that is why that is a very beautiful scene. You see any day of when there is a mass elections in India, you will see the crowd, how enthusiastic they are. I'm talking about the proletariat, about the people who are at the lower end of the social hierarchy, and they actually of course celebrate that this is the power that we have. So in socio-political sphere, the monopolies of the rulers, people don't want the monopolies of the rulers to persist. So that's liberty in a different domain. And of course, in the socio-economic sphere, the bourgeois capitalism has to consent to an equitable economic order where poverty is eliminated and wealth is shared. Of course, it's a subject of economists. It is a subject of economists. How do we do that? It is a very difficult subject, of course. Someone was saying that day that in a capitalist country, you can tax the big industrialists, and with that tax, you can go on helping the poor. So to help the poor, you need to have capitalism. Otherwise, where do you get taxes? See, just giving an example, this is very complex, very complicated. We understand very little of this socio-economic sphere, how we are going to function in a justifiable way where we are not biased. Very difficult. Now, the collapse of the monarchy. Monarchy had its historical value when it consolidated uniqueness and vitality through uniformity. You see, through uniformity, it consolidated uniqueness. Showing the sides of new monarchies in England, from Edward IV to Elizabeth, the Bourbon period in France, from Henry IV to Louis XIV, the rule of Peter the Great and Catherine in Russia, and some of the specific instances. Was such an avid reader of history. He writes about European history as if he is writing it from the middle of Europe. You know, Vladimir, which I feel that you see, seeing something from outside and write it is one thing, and being inside the whole thing and writing it is different. Which must be that Sri Aurobindo's past births in Europe. Of course, we know that Sri Aurobindo had past births in Europe, and there were great figures behind whom was Sri Aurobindo's consciousness was acting, like Octavius or Augustus Caesar. We know that, but you can understand that from inside he's seeing the whole thing. And now, what Sri Aurobindo was emphasizing, that the monarchy had to go collapse because it implied absolutism. It implied absolutism. And then, of course, absolutism is a trend that surfaces at times. Even in Russia, Germany, and Italy in the first part of 20th century, you see, this movement of the trend of absolutism, is shown in these words, they achieved an astonishing completeness in totalitarian states, which never happened in the nations before, which were monarchical nations. They couldn't achieve that. What was achieved in Russia, Germany, and Italy in the first part of the 20th century. So the things can come to such a pass. As things go, as people want more and more liberty, you see, people in the first part of the 20th century, people were wanting liberty. The French Revolution had occurred before that. But even then, that trend to absoluteness had not diminished. It was acting with more power. So that is important. That is very important to understand. Things don't go on. Huh? Asuric forces remain. They are very powerful. And the problem of absolutism, what is the problem of absolutism? Sri Aurobindo explains that it is not only political authority or administrative control, but to have absolute power, you have to have moral policing. That means you have to have full religious power has to be in your hand. Therefore, monarchical authority had to be complemented by religious uniformity. And when you have religious uniformity, you deprive individual liberty. So you see that without moral policing, you cannot have a complete absolutism. And Sri Aurobindo explains that this is the reason why the religious wars happened in France, why Inquisition happened in Spain. It is the reason why the czars attempted to impose an absolute national church. All these things, behind it is this psychology behind this. The psychology behind this is this absolutism, wanting to have religion as its handmaid. The monarchical state with religion is the handmaid of a secular throne. You see, it also happened, in history, that when the Spain Inquisition went to a great extent, and the Pope the papacy, which had once advocated the Inquisition, wanted to stop it. She was opposed not by religious fundamentalists, but by the Spanish throne. This is such a travesty of history. The Spanish throne opposed the Pope when he wanted to stop it. You see, when they started it, but they wanted to stop it when it went out of control. But then then it was the throne which was wanting not to stop, not the religious fundamentalists. So you see, this shows the importance of what Sri Aurobindo says, that political authority and administrative control is incomplete without moral policing if you want to have an absolute power. So this state can last only up to a point until liberty achieves a certain momentum. So until liberty achieves a certain momentum, the force of liberty attains a certain momentum, this phase occurs in the history of world. So what happened that at a time came when the monarchy became self-destructive. The whole what you call the concept of monarchy becomes self-destructive. And then Sri Aurobindo describes how it became self-destructive. The sacerdotal authority of the church could not be maintained by sword and law. You cannot maintain religion by sword and law. You cannot do that. The aristocracy, they had privileges. Though the aristocracy had privileges, but they became questionable to classes below it. You see, in spite of the aristocracy, they were given some privileges. They were given. The absolutist power gave some privileges to the aristocracy, but notwithstanding that, they were questionable to the classes below it. And the bourgeois, Sri Aurobindo said that they were intelligent enough. They retained a lot of intelligence and cleverness. They retained, and because they had that intelligence and that cleverness, they understood that they were being made politically and socially inferior, and that irritated them, and therefore they wanted to lead the revolt. You see, they wanted to lead the revolt. The revolt that came was given the lead by the bourgeois, who, because they had that intelligence, knew that they were being socially and politically, they were being marginalized. And then the masses, the dumb, oppressed, rose with this new support and overturned the whole social hierarchy. These are Sri Aurobindo's words. That the masses, dumb, oppressed, rose with this new support and overturned the social hierarchy. It led to the collapse of the old world and birth of the new age. You see, the collapse of the monarchy and the birth of the nation state that we see today. Now, this quest for liberty triumphed against this absolutism of monarchy. But the problem, as the problem is solved, the problem has not been solved. You see, the nation state has come, but the problem has not been solved. Problem has not been solved because liberty alone is not sufficient to hold the social structure. With liberty alone, you cannot hold the social structure. So justice is needed. Justice is needed. Equality is needed. Liberty and equality have to be reconciled. Very difficult, very difficult. When Vladimir told me that people don't understand what is the social problems, you see, the most important thing that people can't understand is how one has to reconcile liberty and equality. How is very difficult. And Sri Aurobindo explained that an absolute equality is non-existent because in a world of dualities, not because we live in a world of dualities. The manifestation is a world of dualities. See, the manifestation had to be a world of dualities. Otherwise, the manifestation would not have happened if it was not a world of dualities. Then we would have no manifestation at all. It would be the same. Manifestation means variety. Manifestation means diversity. So diversity and variety means duality. And in duality, you cannot have an equality. When you have a duality, there will be always something will be more there and something will be less there. Always it will be like that. So what can be achieved? Of course, is a fundamental equality, equal opportunities to everybody, to health, to education, equal share in the advantages of aggregate life, equal opportunities, our equal share, our an equitable distribution of wealth. All these things at an optimal level can be achieved. Now, in travesty of history, Sri Aurobindo is what you call painfully, he points out that the urge of equality today has reverted to the old notion of the absolute efficient state, no longer monarchical, ecclesiastical, aristocratic. That were the old states, but modern states, which are secular, democratic, and socialistic, there the urge for equality has come in such a way that liberty has to be sacrificed. For aggregate efficiency, liberty has to be sacrificed. So this is what we are seeing in the world. But this is happening because in consciousness, they have to be reconciled. Outwardly, you cannot reconcile them. So this is again a very, what you call, a very different story. You have to understand what Sri Aurobindo has talked about in great details, that liberty and equality cannot be what you call mechanically, they cannot be harmonized. They can be harmonized only at a very deep level of collective consciousness. And how the deep level of collective consciousness. This in collective consciousness means fraternity. Collective consciousness implies fraternity, and fraternity is to be based on soul comradeship, not on egoism or mechanical comradeship, not on mechanical comradeship. So this is something which India has to give in the international orchestra of nations. What India has to contribute, every country, every nation has to contribute something special, and India has to contribute. What India has to contribute is this concept of consciousness, the deepest consciousness behind that can unite liberty and equality. This can come from India. The consciousness of the soul is a soul brotherhood that is going to be what you call implemented, that is needed to come out. So the future of the nations, no, it needs a harmonization at a very deep level of collective psyche. Otherwise, if this doesn't happen, Shobinder's word, anarchy would be preferred over unassimilated repression. If you don't do this, anarchy will be preferred over unassimilated repression. Also, the other factor also is the persistence of national egoism. You see, again, this is a different topic. I think that we will be taking up this in one of these sessions. We will be talking about national egoism. So I have not spent time. I'm not spending time on that. So in this series, there will be a session where you will be having more exposure to this. Now, if national egoisms go on producing armed conflicts, and if this goes beyond a limit, then the time spirit, the zeitgeist, which is wanting world unity, irrespective of whatever nation you are, whatever passion you have for your nation, goddamn, it wants world unity. And if the nation doesn't participate in it, then the time spirit can dissolve the nations. This is Shobinder's warning, that the time spirit can dissolve the nations if the nations cannot come to a poise of fraternity, cannot come to a poise not only of fraternity among themselves in his own nation between liberty and equality, and fraternity with other nations, the comradeship with other nations. You have to move along with and in a unity with other nations. You have to move in an orchestra. If you can't do that, if you don't do that, then you don't think that the time spirit will allow the nation to persist. It doesn't depend upon a passion. So this is a very important thing. And what will be the future of nationhood? This is the last slide. I will say, after that you can give your comments. And Shobinda cites two possible outcomes. You see that there can be, the world can move towards a world unity, which preferably could be a federated unity, a federal unity of nations. And in that federal unity of nations, all nations have to join with equal status, and it has to come with its uniqueness. And Shobinda says that it is, what is the uniqueness? Shobinda's words, vigorous particularism. So each nation has to have a vigorous particularism within a larger federated unity. So yeah, you can join, of course. You can contribute to the orchestra, international orchestra, but you have to have your particular uniqueness, and you have to present it in a vigorous way. You have to be very confident of it. I would say that, you see, different nations would contribute different things to the world orchestra. For India, what is to be presented is the concept of spiritual universalism, which we have. It is we who can provide how the fraternity principle can come in terms of consciousness, so that liberty and equality can be harmonized. It is we can give this. Other nations can give other things. Some nations can give very good examples of how one can prosper economically. Some nations can give an idea of how one can prosper with sports. You see, different nations will give different things. But every country, every nation has to have some uniqueness, and that uniqueness we have to develop. We have to find out. First we have to develop. Otherwise, what we will present? If we don't develop it, if we don't develop that particularism, we can't present it to the world. So we have to first develop it, understand what is our resource, understand what is our inner strength. Our inner strength is not that in India's inner strength is something else, which will be different from the inner strength of a country like China or from a country like Italy. It will be different. Every country will have a different inner meaning, inner strength, inner symbolization, and we have to come up with that. And also, side by side, because of the urge of the world unity of there, the gradual dominance of this idea of the citizen of the world, the sans patrida citizen of the world, which Shobinda says runs counter to the nation idea. But a time will come when even the nation has to accommodate people who have this idea of the world citizen. You see, There will be some people, you see, that, for example, always there will be some people who are atheists. You see, you can't expect everybody will believe in God. The mother said that as long as religion is there, atheists will also be there, because religion has got many problems, and the atheists are there to challenge that. You need that challenge. So like that, as long as nations are there and national egoisms are there, so side by side, something else will also develop, and the nation has to come to terms with that. The nation of the future cannot, afford to ignore this idea of the science factory, the citizen of the world. The Shiva said that is going to come, that it is going to dominate. You just can't drive it away. In fact, it can be good, because when it comes, then the nation idea can be stabilized more. You see, if you are not taking care of the nation idea, you are immersed in national egoism, and if some people want to go beyond the nations, then the nation, the people who are with the nation idea, they will find out what is their deficiency, and they can, correct themselves. So in a way, this is the balancing. But this balancing that will happen in nature, because nature wants unity. Nature wants unity. Nature wants unity, and we can't deny that unity is a principle of nature. Unity was there in Satchidananda. Unity was there in Brahman. Unity was there in creation. From Brahman we have come. From unity we have come. From to unity we will go. So how can we say that we will live as separate nations, daggers drawn always throughout? It can't be. Unity is the watchword. Unity is the main thing. Unity is reality. So the unity will always there. Unity will always be there. The impulse will be always there. And we have to recognize that. And if we have our national egoisms, and we can persist with that, then we also have people like that, and we have to acknowledge them. We have to be with them. And finally, Vishnu says, a bit humorously, the nation might persist, but with the reduced and subjected vitality, it goes on like this, or any living spirit of particularism or separatism. If you don't have any living spirit of particularism, if you are not sure of your uniqueness, if you are not sure of your uniqueness, you are just going on fighting, and you are just going on amassing weapons and trying to show that you are mightier than the other nations. You are doing that, then the nation will persist, but as a convenience, as an administrative rather than a psychological fact, like a French department or an English county. They are sure in those words. And however, Shiva has also assured us that even if there is a federation of world union, where all countries have come to a federated setup, and in that federal setup, the unity is mechanical, the unity is not living, doesn't have any consciousness, doesn't have any vibrancy, then the nation idea can again come from the collective, what you call unconscious of the nations. It can again rise up, and it can reassert itself. So the nation idea is something that is still will be there. It will be there in the collective unconscious. You can't, it was there so long, you can't just wipe it away. So if in a different world we have come together on the basis of a unity, of a federated unity, where all nations will contribute to something or the other. But if that unity is mechanical, if the unity doesn't have any value in terms of consciousness, then the nation idea can again have a resurgence. It again have a comeback. Finally, I would say that the mother wanted that in a new United Nations, something like the Security Council will be replaced by a forum where each nation will be represented by the best person, one single individual person. But that doesn't mean that the bigger nation will be represented by many persons. Not that. Each nation is representing a psychological idea. Each nation is representing a psychological uniqueness. Each nation is something unique in terms of consciousness. So each nation will have a same role, and each nation will be represented by a single person, regardless of your size or shape or your population. That doesn't matter. And in a new type of world unity, when there is a new type of world council, then we have a council like this, but each nation will have its best person who is representative of it as a member who is forwarding its case. So thank you. This is just the starting point of this this flow of nation ideas and all that will be coming up in the next webinars one by one, which they have the Vladimir and Radhe, they have organized, and I hope it comes out well. And they start from where we are ending today, so that some of the seed ideas that we have given here, you will find it more expressed in the coming webinars that will be following. thank you. I would invite not only questions but also comments, because this is something which is of something which one should think about, comment about. I give the mic to Vladimir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sumitra, for this beautiful presentation from the very foundations of Sri Aurobindo's thought. You went stage by stage. That's we wanted. We wanted to see those elements which nobody actually follows properly. We understand in general certain things, but this stage by stage understanding was very, very useful. And I believe there will be many questions, and myself, I have many answers from your presentation, especially with regard to India's development and how Brahminhood was dominating and what happened and why the invasion took place, because it's a necessity of the future development of that liberalism, which is a part of the whole process of awakening of the nation's souls. And especially the last presentation of the future of the nations was very interesting, especially this citizenship of the world, and where the nations of different kind will interact with other nations, live in other countries, and learn from them some elements which they need for their own national development, which is quite interesting, and maybe even, nourish and develop better the uniqueness of their own national spirits. So I wanted also to mention that the same idea is in the 5 dreams, as you remember. Sri Aurobindo speaks about this, that let me quote from him, let me find that. I prepared this just to make a quotation, but this is the 3rd dream. The 3rd dream was a world union forming the outer basis of a fairer, brighter, nobler life for all mankind. And there he mentions this nationalism. But the outward basis is not enough. There must grow up an international spirit and outlook. International forms and institutions must appear, perhaps such developments as dual or multilateral citizenship, willed exchange or voluntary fusion of cultures. Willed exchange or voluntary fusion of cultures. Nationalism will have fulfilled itself and lost its militancy. It's interesting. And would no longer find these things incompatible with self-preservation and the integrality of its outlook. The new spirit of oneness will take hold of the human race. And we can see these elements in Europe. There are no borders, and Frenchies may live in Germany and Germans in France, and there is no problem with that. The self-identity, the national identity is already formed, and it's not threatened by anybody. So this is a new stage which is already taking place in the world. It's beautiful how Sri Aurobindo and you especially presented all his views. Thank you for this. It was my short comment. I guess it wasn't so short, but now we come to the questions and answers. And if Martha wants to say something, or Radhe, please just join. And before we go to the question and answer session. You have to unmute yourself in case you want to say something. Right, then we come to the questions and answers. There are long, as you see, long questions here.
I read the questions.
Okay.
But you have to read them. For the audience, you have to read them.
Right.
So we'll start from the bottom and go to the top.
Oh, from the bottom to the top. Okay. So I come from this. Are the references from Sri Aurobindo all from the human cycle, the ideal of human unity and war and the self-determination?
Mainly from chapter 13 of the Ideal of Human Unity. These references are mostly from chapter 13, some from other chapters, but from the Ideal of Human Unity.
Yeah, thank you. Mother had written in the beginning of the 20th century that she belongs to no country, religion, etc. How is that powerful statement of hers related to the idea of sans patrie?
And she was a world citizen. You know, see that famous statement of her when she applied for the Indian citizenship, that I am French by birth and early education, I am Indian by choice and predilection. In my consciousness, there is no antagonism between the two. I hope I shall be allowed to remain French while I am Indian. So that set the tone for multiple citizenship. You see, that actually set the tone, which afterwards came to came to happen. Multiple citizenship, it was Sri Aurobindo's idea. Sri Aurobindo had first hinted about multiple citizenship. And when mother gave this statement, it was the first practical statement of being a multiple citizen. So she is, of course, she is the world mother, and she has transcended all nations, all things. She has transcended all. And at the same time, she has included everything in her bosom. So she has included all the uniqueness of all the nations. She was quite aware of them. She carried in her consciousness the uniqueness. And again, she would be the transcendent mother. She was beyond also. So
By the way, yes, she's a unique case because India does not permit double citizenship. So she had her double citizenship, French and Indian. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. There is another question. I'm living in Belgium. Say it again?
Belgium. You read out this question.
Ah, okay. I'm living in Belgium, and my feeling is that our present monarchy, a young couple, very spiritual, open to all, and always talking of unity, is holding the country together. Belgium is made of extreme political regions, what I'm saying, political regions, right, extreme right in the north, left, extreme left in the south, Brussels in the center, with a very mixed population and good percentage of Muslims. I may be wrong and not especially fond of monarchy, most probably, but without it, I wonder if we would still have a country, at least for the time being, as the North has a high demand for independence. I'm looking forward to your vision on this. So it's about Belgium.
It's complicated.
And monarchy. Monarchy, does it play any role?
But I would say that as she described the present population of Belgium, there is a lot of heterogeneity there. And for a political self-consciousness to develop from such a heterogeneity, until that develops, then you have to have certain means like the monarchy or all these things. They serve a purpose until something develops. You see, it has to be people have a subconscious need to hold on to something, and until things are ready, they have to hold on something which is already there, which is time tested, because the political self-consciousness has to develop. Now, in that mass of heterogeneity, how long it will take to develop? If you ask me, what is Sri Aurobindo's contribution to Indian nationalism? I will say that the first thing, he consolidated the nation idea of India in the psyche of the race. You see what he has done. What he has done during that very small time he was there in the freedom movement, not much. 1909 he was released, and then he's 1910 he's in Pondicherry. So up to that time, what he has done, but he has consolidated the psyche of the nation, so that in that mass of heterogeneity, and that he was helped in many ways. For example, as he has given an example that Muslim invaders who had come here, they assimilated into Indian culture. They didn't remain as something separate. So that was already a homework was done. You see, a homogeneity has to come. In a mass, a homogeneity has to come so that the political self-consciousness develops. If you see from the psychological perspective, unless a homogeneity comes, how will a mass consciousness develop? So in India, the background was developing, and then there was the spiritual and cultural oneness that was there. Now in Belgium, I don't know. I'm not will be able to tell it better. So in India, we already had a spiritual and cultural oneness. Already also the invaders were come and assimilated with the Indian culture. This homework was there, and then Sri Aurobindo consolidated that idea of nation in the masses, in the psyche of the people. So the background was prepared for him. But I don't know, in Belgium, until the background is prepared, the monarchy has to serve a purpose to hold the nation together. Such a heterogeneity, somebody has to take a lead, or circumstances will take a lead, or education will take a lead. If somebody doesn't come, modern situation will change, education will take a lead.
Right.
Or somebody from Europe can comment. I am not from Europe, so it is not proper for me to comment. But I think somebody who is conversant with European culture, with European things, can comment on this. From the people who are listening, somebody can comment.
Yeah, I would like to make a kind of comment on this. The question was around the monarchy, which is holding the ground for other processes to take place, unity and so on. And it's quite interesting because this is the very definition of monarchy, not only in Belgium, but also in Norway and all other kingdoms who are kingdoms. Yeah, they have democratic countries, but they have, or Britain for that matter, yes, they have a queen. But their role is very interesting. Their role is needed for the transition between different states or different governments, yeah, different elections. They are securing the ground of the same direction of development. And in the time of war, when there is a destruction, they come into power. So basically, they hold the ground for all the changes, so to say, from the past, the best formation of the past, as Sri Aurobindo says, this monarchy of the second stage of development of nationhood. And they are not actively participating, but passively, so to say, as a background, securing the development. It might be the thought of it. I was thinking about this before. What are they doing there? They are doing not much, but they are providing that security of change, of proper development. And there is one more question, the most kind of challenging. Dr. Basu, can you elaborate on the emergence of the soul of nation? It seems that you are covering the external aspects of formation of nations, but when does a nation's soul begin to form? Is it related to ethnicity or in any way? Or if we look back at history, we find several places in the world where civilization arose, Indus Valley, Mesopotamia, Nile Valley, etc. Was there a nation soul back in those early stages, or does nation soul emerge later?
I will say this from the Indian perspective because I would not be able to comment on Western things because I do not belong. From my background. But I will tell you what Sri Aurobindo speaks about India, that Sri Aurobindo very specifically points out that the political self-consciousness had not been developed in India. Now, these tribes and all ethnic groups, of course, they had their what you call guardian angels. That was always there. But that doesn't mean that they had developed a nation soul. So every tribe, every collectivity, everything has something which is a guardian angel which is guiding them, which is supporting them. There's a support from behind, there's a soul support from behind, but that soul has not become a nation soul. So therefore that, what you call for very primitive what you call support, soul support to that is maintaining the tribe, maintaining an ethnic group. To become a nation becomes a bit different. Then it has to become more sophisticated in terms of thinking, in terms of intellectuality, in terms of the people, in terms of social functioning, which have to be stratified, and to support them. You see, the nation's soul has to slowly develop. Vishnu Sri says that it is still developing. It is still not developed. So this is because until the concept of fraternity is stabilized on soul comradeship, liberty and equality cannot be reconciled, and you cannot have, because the nation soul is different from the soul when we talk about a spiritual soul. This nation soul has to be seen in a social perspective. Shobhindu uses it in a social perspective. Of course, that is a guiding angel. That is a guiding angel which is there behind. That is a divine guidance which is helping us to move along. But in India, the tradition of that divine tradition has been there. It has been developed for ages and ages by our seers, by our mystics, by our rishis. That has been developed. You cannot say that can happen at every race or with every ethnic group. That can happen. What has happened in India? So in India, what has happened is something special. But if you see the soul, in what context are we using the word soul? Are we using the word soul in the way we use Jivatma, either use it with Paramatma or the psychic being? Or when you're talking about the socials of the nation, then the soul is you're using it in a social matrix. Yet we want to have a component of the deeper consciousness inside it. So from that social construct of a soul to a deeper construct which has the component of soul consciousness, then you have to have this fraternity of soul comradeship, giving a template for liberty and equality to be reconciled. That has still not happened to the extent which it should have happened. It is still growing. It is still in a nascent state. So what we talk about the nation soul, when Shobhindu talks about the nation soul in the ideal human unity, is talking about the emergence. You see from where I have taken this chapter, he has actually named the chapter, the formation of the nation's soul. Though he's talking about the outer things, but the chapter's name is the formation of the nation's soul, the 3 stages of the formation of the nation's soul. So he used the word nation's soul, though he's talking about, you see, all social things. Because the soul at first is a constructed soul, and from there we are trying to take it to a deeper level so that it reflects the unitary consciousness of the actual self or the actual soul. So it's a different context. We have to build it up. We have to build it up. It is a thing that we have to build up. It is not given to us, like the psychic being or the Jivatma is there and we are developing it. But on the social side, it is different. It is we have to take the initiative to develop it and to bring it in consonance with the deeper wisdom that we have. Of course, there will be a guiding spirit, and but for the tribes and for the ethnic groups, there were guardian angels, which were also in charge of these tribes or groups that were working. That is a different thing. That's different from the nation's soul. So there is a guardian spirit that is driving them or that is sustaining them. So it's not an evolved nation soul like that. For the nation soul to evolve, the political self-consciousness has to develop, which comes with civilization. I think that you would add to this.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much for this exploration. And if Marta or Radhe, please, if you have some thoughts or questions, please go ahead.
Yeah, no real question, but just really wanted to thank you, Dr. Basu. It was just a wonderful way of launching the foundation of what's going to be this 4-part series, and we're hoping you and others will just stay with us throughout this. But I just wanted to thank you and express my appreciation.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And yes, with this especially last statement of yours, some thoughts came into my mind of the development. What is this soul? Nobody knows what is nation's soul and how it emerges. Yes, it emerges through preparing the instruments of its own. And these stages which you described is this preparation, is a pressure of some kind of formation which is kind of molding of the humanity or the part of humanity within a particular land with particular history, with particular formation, structure, hierarchy, political, social, and so on, life, into the means of its own expression. And this is something interesting because it's like it's as if somebody asked. I think it was in the evening talks. Somebody asked about nation soul, and what Sri Aurobindo answered was for me a very unexpected answer, because I never thought of it in that way. He says that it is a typal being. It is not evolving. So nation soul is not evolving, but it creates all those. It's like Jivatma, let us say, yes? It creates all those carriers or instruments to respond to it and to express it. And somebody asked, and if there would be no nation to carry to the influence of this soul, there will be no language anymore, no culture, people will be dispersed, go to other countries and disappear. What will happen to the nation soul? And he says it will return to its origin, to the divine origin. So if there is no more the carrier, this is something really to think of. It's a mysterious. That's why Sri Aurobindo says in the ideal of human unity that there is this kind of statement I will read, because this is the most. It was shocking for me. Nothing is more obscure to humanity or less seized by its understanding than its own communal and collective life. So here we are. We try to figure out something which is very mysterious. What is this human unity? And in other place he speaks about 3 steps of Vishnu. Yeah, the first step is formation of the family. Within the family, you have love. Mother loves and can sacrifice her life for her children. But then it has to expand. And how it expands to other creatures, other beings. How can I love somebody who is not from my family, who is not blood related? So this is the formation of the nation soul comes into second step. And the third will be the human unity. Once we are trained to love others, that brotherhood you mentioned, that fraternity, which is emerging as the psychic quality, which can balance the equality and liberty finally. And all the struggles you can see in the world with all the examples today, when you were making your presentations, I could see all the elements emerging here and there in Russia, and again, trying to drag back the whole development to that which was already achieved before in the history. But it is not going to happen because the history moves forward, yeah? So evolution goes forward. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. It's a super initiation for our discussions in the future, and I hope you will join us also and bring your input also into these sessions.
Thank you. And I just want to mention before people leave that next Saturday, as we've mentioned, we'll go into the second part of this series, and we have Dr. Alok Pandey, and he'll get deeper into the individual souls of specific nations and explore that whole aspect of nation souls. So if you've registered for today, you're automatically registered for week and the following 2. And the other thing we want to mention, if you could pull up or screen share, Vladimir, is a new event that we will be announcing this afternoon. And okay, I thought there was going to be a slightly different one. Let me just see if I can screen share a second, Vladimir, to show a different picture here. If I have it up. Yeah, here we go. Okay, can you see that? Okay. You see that, Vladimir, okay?
Yeah, we see.
So this will be announcing this afternoon, and it's an event that will take place here in Greenville at the Hyatt Regency on October 8th. It'll be a full day workshop or seminar, and also available online. And it's called In Search of Your Inner Guide. And it's going to be a full day seminar on how to find answers and directions in life that are aligned with our innermost being or our true self. And during the webinar, we'll have practical tools, we'll have experiential exercises and more that will be given to help us tune into that presence of our inner guide when making not only major life decisions, but just as important everyday choices. And we're just very, very excited to announce that Dr. Brant Courtright will be our keynote speaker. I think just about everybody on this call is familiar with him. We have hosted him several times on New Perspectives. We also are honored to have as a guest speaker Vikas Srivastava, who is the Director of Social Emotional Wellbeing here at Legacy Early College in Greenville. So this will be the first full day seminar that we're hosting. It's an extension of New Perspectives, and that it is a full day. And everyone here will be receiving an email later today with details. So we'll hope you'll join us either here in Greenville at the Hyatt Regency or on Zoom. We're going to have an interesting and enriching day of discovery and exploration. So thank you. And I just want to thank again, Dr. Basu for joining us today. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste. And thank you, Martha, too, for coming in.
Yes, thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Look forward to your talk with Vladimir and Jared Quick.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Namaste.